Fabio Wardley, Justis Huni. That was the definition of an incredible heavyweight fight. Let's look at the situation there. Fabio Wardley had, and let me say this before I go any further. Fabio Wardley had one of the greatest comeback knockouts you will see in boxing. And this is what I love about boxing. There is no other sport in all the world where you can be down, getting blown out in a fight, or a performance, or a sport, whatever the case may be, any event, and in a moment's notice, you can come back and erase that entire deficit in one split second. We witnessed that happen once again in an incredible KO by Fabio Wardley. A KO that might just go down as the KO of the year this year. And I saw some stuff going on X, and it bothered me a little bit. A lot of people were talking about this KO that Fabio Wardley had and said this is very Deontay Wilder-like. And to that I say, absolutely, that was a Deontay Wilder-type knockout. Wilder was the guy that was never going to beat you on points. He was not a very skilled fighter whatsoever, but we knew he had one of the most powerful punches in all mankind history. And that punch that Deontay Wilder was capable of having allowed him to have one of the greatest knockout ratios in boxing history. And we witnessed a sign of that in Fabio Wardley when he fought on Saturday. And there were a lot of people going out there saying, okay, so we have the next Deontay Wilder. Well, first of all, I don't believe that Fabio Wardley will be as big as Deontay Wilder was in peak Deontay Wilder. We're talking about a guy that was a world champion for 5 years straight. We're talking about a guy that had some of the most devastating knockouts in boxing history. But to say that as a slander, that you're just Deontay Wilder, and I get where the people are coming from. Okay, Deontay Wilder was not a very skilled fighter. Is that the type of guy you want to become like? But listen, if you ask me, a guy that has a net worth of over $150 to $200 million, a man that accomplished some of the greatest feats in boxing history as a heavyweight, having some of the most iconic knockouts, a guy that had one of the most iconic trilogies that we've had in the recent memory between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, a guy that was a world champion for 5 years, if you're going to tell a boxer that that's going to be his career, I think 99.99999% of boxers in the world would be A-okay with that record. And so if you're going to tell me that Fabio Wardley is the next Deontay Wilder, I don't think that's really a shot at him at all. And so I really don't know where that stigma came from. But let's go back into this fight, because there's two things I really want to point out here. First and foremost, I said on Friday's show, for Justis Huni, the biggest question mark for him was going to be this right here in that chin. If it gets tapped, it was something that could lead to him being knocked lights out. We have seen it before against lesser opponents with nowhere near the power that Fabio Wardley possesses. And he got stunned and or hurt many times throughout his career. And I said, when you fight a guy like Fabio Wardley, with the power of Fabio Wardley, who in his last performance put a dent in the head of Fraser Clark, that's not the guy that you want to step into a ring with and say, you know what, if I'm going to take a hit, that's not the guy you want to get hit by if you're Justis Huni. And we witnessed that. On the very end of round one, you could tell that Justis Huni got buzzed. Nothing severe, and it was not a very clean shot, but he got stunned. And he headed into the corner at the end of round one, and he was able to regather himself. But for the remainder of that fight up until the KO, Justis Huni fought a brilliant fight. To the point that I would even say this, he was putting on a masterclass against Fabio Wardley. He was debatably up at almost all rounds. I had Fabio Wardley winning one round. I think it was round 2, if I'm not mistaken. But even that round was very questionable. Justis Huni was putting on a masterclass until that moment hit, when Fabio Wardley stunned him, knocked him out. And for the other people that want to make the whole debate around the 10 count, listen to this. Anybody that's seen the video, it was a proper 10 count. Was it quicker than a lot of referees typically give for the 10 count? Absolutely. And when you look back in recent memory, obviously the Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury fight, that was closer to 18 seconds. That is obviously a lot longer time span that he was given on the ground to recover as opposed to Justis Huni. But at the end of the day, it was still 10 seconds from the time he hit the ground to the time that the ref called the fight. And at that point in time, the only answer is that it was counted as a proper knockout. That should end the debate right then and there. There's no point in continuing this debate, and the fact that Justis Huni's camp is going to go out there and try to go launch an official protest over the referee's count is not going to be successful, and I don't see any point in doing so. Now, going back to Justis Huni. This is a man that I think has the capabilities of being an excellent fighter throughout his career. But if his chin is made of glass to the extent in which we have witnessed, it's going to hinder him at the heavyweight division, especially drastically. When you get buzzed that quickly, that easily, and you're able to get stunned by Fabio Wardley in the way that you got devastatingly knocked out, it's a bad, bad case of a recipe to make for the heavyweight division. And it's unfortunate because he is a very skilled fighter. And I even talked about that on Friday's show. Justis Huni is a much more skilled fighter than Fabio Wardley. Now, I do think that Fabio Wardley was a little bit off his game on Saturday. I think he looked a lot worse in terms of his skill than he is. But still, Huni was going to run laps around him regardless when it talks about ring IQ, boxing skills, so on and so forth. The biggest hindrance, and it can't be your biggest weakness. If your biggest weakness at the heavyweight division is having a glass chin, you're going to be in for a world of trouble. And we witnessed that on Saturday's fight. Huni was going to cruise through the upset against Fabio Wardley in Fabio Wardley's home. And that glass chin led to that massive knockout. And so what do you look at for Justis Huni moving forward? This is a guy, like I said, if his chin can hold up, he can accomplish a lot of things at the heavyweight division. But that is a massive, all uppercase if for Justis Huni. And so what could possibly be next for Justis Huni? Well, when you look at his resume now, he has positioned himself where he has a big enough name that there's no point in just doing a little no-name fight for moving forward. He has officially proven that he is a guy that can compete with the top 15 guys at the heavyweight division. And so some guys I'll just throw out there that would make sense, that are big money-making fights. Now, obviously, these will vary from guy to guy in terms of what's big, but still, all fights that will make a decent amount of money and would also prove himself to be able to go out there and make another step-up fight. Here's the names I came up with. 2 American young heavyweights, Jared Anderson, Richard Torres Jr. Both of those fights are intriguing to me. Now, listen to those 2 guys. I do think Jared Anderson and Richard Torres Jr. is the fight to make, but still, both guys would make sense for Huni. Hrgovic could make sense. Andy Ruiz, Frank Sanchez, Lawrence Okoli, Dave Allen. All of those fights would make a lot of sense. I feel like for the UK fan base, and I respect the UK fan base so much when we talk about boxing out there, if you go out there and you have a good performance, a respectable performance, you are an upstanding type of guy, the UK fan base will embrace you. I feel like it's very similar out there in Japan as well, but since we're talking about the UK fan base, if you are in the UK, the fans will rally behind you and you can create a market for yourself in the UK if you go out there as a respectable man and you can go out there and take a defeat or perform nicely, you're going to earn the respect of the UK fans. And that's why I think a fight against a guy like Dave Allen or Lawrence Okoli, those type of fights would make sense. I think they would welcome him with open arms in the UK, and he could go out there and have another big fight against one of those type of guys. So Justis Huni, I don't think his career is over. We're going to see him come back again, but it's just going to be the bigger question mark. Can he withstand not getting hit? Because if he gets hit by a power puncher, it's going to be lights out for Justis Huni. He has a glass chin. Let's head over now to the man that I want to wrap up this portion of the fight about, and that's Fabio Wardley. I just want to give all props to him in this performance. As I said, I think something was off that night for him. I don't think he was performing to the top of his ability. And that's not an excuse. It's just a sense of saying, you know what? He was able to battle through something not being right that night to still perform a massive KO in that fight to come out victorious. Fabio Wardley has had one of the most remarkable stories in all of heavyweight boxing, in all boxing right now. Where he was started at to where he's at today is an incredible testament to who he is as a person. And so just to begin with, Fabio Wardley is an upstanding guy, and it's easy to root for a guy like that. And then when you talk about him in the ring, he is a warrior in that ring. And his power, what he brings to that ring, makes for exciting fights at all times. We were all waiting for it. We knew that the only way he was going to win that fight was by KO. And when he went out there and landed that, it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. As I said, very likely that could go down as the knockout of the year. What's next for Fabio Wardley? There's a lot of fights you could make. The big thing with the heavyweight division is that the heavyweight division is tied up with what happens on July 19th. You have a fight with Usyk and Dubois. If Usyk wins that fight, you know Usyk will not be fighting for at least 6 more months. And that fight that he has will likely be the final fight of his career. Who will he fight in that fight? We do not know yet. A lot of rumors have pointed to the fact that he could possibly go out there and fight a trilogy with the winner of Fight Fury and Anthony Joshua later this year. That could be the final fight for Usyk. And if that is the case, the heavyweight belts will be tied up for quite some time. If Dubois wins that fight, obviously the fights will get moving. He'll probably return to the ring very shortly. And I'm sure we'll have Joseph Parker fighting him in the near future. So a lot of things hinge on what happens July 19th. But for Fabio Wardley, he is now the interim champion for the WBA. he has the opportunity to do one of two things. He could either go out there and wait out for the winner of Dubois and Usyk, and likely then Dubois, and if Dubois wins, obviously it could then be Joseph Parker. But if that fight goes where Usyk wins it and Usyk does not want to fight Joseph Parker, you could very likely see a massive heavyweight fight between two interim champions in Fabio Wardley and Joseph Parker. For myself personally, I think both guys deserve a world title chance. And if it wasn't for having an all-time great and Usyk hold his belt right now, you would see that fight happen. However, because we're in a weird situation right now, Fabio Wardley and Joseph Parker could be a massive fight to make, maybe even for the co-main event. Eventually, for another fight, if you have the Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury, something along those lines, you could see them fighting there. But that is obviously a main event worthy fight as well. Other fights you could see him go after and pursue could be someone that he talked about a few weeks ago. Deontay Wilder. If Wilder has a massive performance in a couple of weekends, that would be a big money fight for Fabio Wardley. Chisora, he pointed out that it's a fight he'd be interested in. That would be a huge domestic fight to make as well. Michael Hunter could also be on the table. Now, like I said, all these only hinge on the fact of what happens July 19th. I don't think we're going to have any more heavyweight decisions be made public up until the results come out of July 19th. So right now we can talk about what fights we want to see. All those are entertaining, but the biggest thing hinges on the fact of what happened July 19th. Once we find those results and we see what happens in that fight, the heavyweight division should be able to get moving again. So all hinges on that point in time.